I just want to remind you before it starts to always consult a physician before making any changes to your healthcare plan. And I'd like to remind you that nothing in this video, nothing you hear on the Juicebox podcast or read on ardensday.com constitutes medical advice of any kind. The supporting documents and social media for the podcast, this video, and the blog are also not to be considered as advice. Please read this disclaimer before starting to view this episode.
Podcast?
Yep.
All right. Okay.
You're good. All right, great. So I'm going to start a little bit. There's still people trickling in, but that's okay. So guys, I usually when I give a talk in public, when people are coming in the room, these are up on the screen already. And I leave them up there so that they can sort of believe before we start talking that there's a way to help their blood sugars that isn't incredibly difficult and that other people are accomplishing. All right. So I'm not going to make you please don't read them all, but I want you to know genuinely that I get about 4 to 6 of these a day. Okay. So sometime in the next 2 months, the podcast will reach 2 million downloads. It is listened to in every country on the planet, with the exception of the midsection of Africa, North Korea, and I think Antarctica. And other than that, there are people in every other country doing exactly what we're going to talk about here today, and they got it from the podcast. So it came directly from me. I didn't hear it somewhere else, and I'm trying to retell it to you. Now, before we start, it's very important to know that I'm an idiot. Okay. I'm not a doctor. I barely got through high school. How many days of school are there? Like 180, something like that. I missed 51 of my senior year days of school because I just went to work or didn't feel like waking up. Like, really, this is not medical advice. Okay. I'm going to talk to you about how I've been managing my daughter. And let me tell you a little bit about that. So my daughter is 15 now. She'll be 16 this summer. And she's had type 1 diabetes since she was 2. And I have been her caregiver the entire time for diabetes. Obviously, she's more involved now than she was when she was 2, but that's not the point. The point is I've been there from the beginning. In the beginning, I would make her blood sugar really high and then really low. And then at the end of the day, I would go take a shower and hide from my family and cry because I was like, man, I'm really messing this up. Like seriously not doing a very good job at this. And that went on for a couple of years. I started to figure things out a little bit, but then she got a continuous glucose monitor and I started seeing what was happening with her blood sugar. And all of a sudden, things started to make sense. And I could see that she wasn't getting enough insulin in a lot of different places in the course of her day. But I didn't have the nerve to do something about it. And by that, I mean, I was really scared of the insulin. So I know we're all muted and there's, at this point, there's 40 people in here. So just of the people I'm looking at, if you're a little afraid of making yourself low, can I see your hand? Makes sense. Are you, if you're being managed mostly by your parents and you're not making a lot of those decisions, put your hand up. Okay. So that's good because you guys are a lot more brave as a group than I was as a father. So I spent probably a year trying to figure out how to get myself over that hump and make a better decision. And one day I was talking to my daughter's uh, endocrinologist, and I said to her, I don't understand, like, how do I do this? And she didn't have an answer. And we kept going back and forth. And finally, I just said to her, if I gave you a magic wand and I could make you in charge of the world for a minute, and you could make people with type 1 diabetes do one thing and one thing only, what would you do? And she didn't even blink an eye. And she said, I'd make them not be afraid of insulin. Most people are not using enough insulin. And I was like, okay. So I went home and I told my wife, I just have to not be afraid of insulin. Which I couldn't just talk myself into it. I was like, ugh. So I spent a year writing about it because I used to have a blog. I'm very old. Blogs used to be this thing where people got information from people who like didn't work for CNN. And I wrote a blog for a really long time. And one year I wrote a 6-part series about not being afraid of insulin. But the truth is, I was afraid of insulin. So what I was really doing in my writing was talking myself out of being afraid. And once I did that, the world opened up for me around diabetes. Things started to fall into place. And now my daughter, who's 15, her A1C has been between 5.2 and 6.2 for almost 6 years. She has no diet restrictions. Last night at 10 o'clock, she said, "Can I have pasta and an orange?" I don't know who eats those two things together, but she does. And we took care of it. And we've been doing that now for a long time with the stuff that we're going to talk about today. So I hate doing a slideshow over Zoom because that seems really dorky. But I'm going to hit the ones that I think are important and talk you through them a little bit. So know that I've given this talk to people your age, whether you're in here and you're 10. I've given this talk to people who are 50, who are 80, who are just diagnosed, who have had diabetes for 20 years. And most of them come away with very similar feelings. So while we're talking today, we're going to talk just in general about the idea of being aggressive or bold with your insulin decisions. We'll go over a little bit how most people who are struggling to keep their blood sugar stable probably don't have enough basal insulin or their basal insulin's not right. I'm going to tell you right now that whatever your A1C is, it'll be a point lower in 3 months if you pre-bolus. And then I'm going to tell you, you have to pre-bolus. You can't say things like, I forgot, or that's not fun, because I know it sucks. Like I've been doing it for somebody for a really long time, reminding them before every meal when they don't remember. But that doesn't matter. What matters is that you can't get the timing of your insulin correct without pre-bolusing a meal. And I'll explain why. More insulin, and then the idea of bumping and nudging. So I want to see if I can't make a poll, although I apparently don't know how to do it. CGMs, yes or no? Okay. Pumps, nothing. MDI and no CGM. Okay. All right. So this graph here that says Emicate on it at the top, the one at the top, I got that from this little girl's mother. She found me through Facebook and sent me this, her 24-hour graph of her child's blood sugars, and asked me if I could help her. And I want you to know that the graph underneath of it was the graph she sent me the next day, 24 hours later. Okay. And the only thing I said to her mother is the stuff I'm going to say to you now. Nothing else. She didn't get any magical tips. There's not like 80% of this is free and the last 20% you have to pay for. Everything I'm going to say today is what she got. And then I want you to see too, this other graph in the purple, the words above it, they're important. And the part of it that is important to me is that a person sent me this and said that they stopped thinking about diabetes for a couple of hours. And the reason I put that in there is because at some point while we're talking, you're going to be like, yo, this guy is saying I got to pay attention to my diabetes every second. And I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is that in the beginning, when you put these things into practice, it's going to take more focus than it will long term. So I swear to you, around here, we never talk about diabetes because we're in a rhythm, right? We know what to do, we know when to do it, and we just do it. It's a matter of course. It's no different than if I got up to walk out of this room right now, I would reach for the door knob without thinking about reaching for the doorknob. And that can be that way around your diabetes. It's going to take a little practice, but it's very doable. Okay. So no matter what I say today, at its core, what I'm saying to you is that type 1 diabetes management is about timing and amount. It's about understanding how insulin works. You can use the right amount of insulin at the wrong time. You can use the wrong amount of insulin at the right time. Nothing's ever going to work out that way. It's important to know that at its base, basal is first. Okay. When I say insulin, I bet most of your minds were like, oh, around my food. I mean that too. But your basal has to be well timed and well apportioned as well. You can't have a bad basal insulin and expect your bolus to work. And I'll tell you a little more why. But everything we talk about today is understanding how insulin works in you, in your body. That's all we're talking about. Doesn't matter if one of you has a pre-bolus that's 15 minutes long usually, and one of you has a pre-bolus that's 10 minutes long. That's cool. That works for you. It's all about you. Now, it's important to remember, because you're kids and because I'm not a doctor, it's important again to remember I'm not a doctor. It's also really important to remember that insulin used incorrectly is pretty dangerous. Okay. But you can't think about it that way. You need to consider insulin the way you think about fire or driving in traffic, right? It's something you need to do, but you need to do it respectfully. You cannot just say, oh, my blood sugar's been high all day. I don't know. I'm just going to give myself 10 units to see what happens. That's a good way to end up dead. Okay. Like you need to be thoughtful about it and respect it. Okay. Very important. So I usually put this up because I think that most people get accustomed to a higher number or start at a higher number because they're diagnosed, right? And when you're diagnosed, what do they tell you? Like, keep it somewhere between 80 and 200. Has everybody heard that? Just keep your blood sugar there. And then all of a sudden you're like, okay, well, it's 210. And in your brain does math for itself. And it goes, that's only 10 points higher than the doctor said I should keep it. Not true. The doctor said you could keep it at 80. 10 points higher than that would be 90. 210 is 100 points higher than 90. Right? I don't have diabetes. I mean, I should knock on wood, but my blood sugar is probably right now about 86. So if you didn't have diabetes, your blood sugar would probably be 86. So when it's 150 or 180 or 210 or 300, every point over that it's dangerous for your body. Now, I'm not saying it's not going to happen and you shouldn't freak out every time it does happen. But when it does, there are steps to take to get it back down without making yourself low. Okay. You can't just say, oh, 210, that's not bad. It's only 10 points higher, because you start getting accustomed to that. It's sort of like getting fat. And this I can speak to from personal experience. Okay. Like first you gain 3 pounds, right? And you're like, yeah, it's just 3 pounds. And then 2 weeks later, it's just 5 pounds. Then it's just 10 pounds. And before you know it, you're like, I look good like this. It kind of gets away from you. Blood sugars can do the same thing. I'm not saying your blood sugar always needs to be 85. And I don't want you to think that my daughter's blood sugar is always 85, because it is not. Okay. But what I mean is, you can't stare at high blood sugars for long times because you're afraid of the answer, or you think you're just going to make yourself low later, or you're like, oh, it'll probably just come down on its own. If your blood sugar is staying at 300 for 2 hours and then coming down on its own, your insulin is so wrong. It's so wrong. Okay. It shouldn't do that. So one more time, timing and amount. Everything about type 1 diabetes is timing and amount. Okay. Can you guys hear me okay? Am I too loud to you? It's good? Okay. Whether it's basal or a bolus, it's timing and amount. I hope you can see this. I don't know if it'll show up. That's my daughter's last 24 random hours. Her low is 70 and her high is 120. Okay. I wouldn't call that a good day. She was low overnight because of that pasta bolus that got away from us. But we took care of it, got her back up. But the important thing is we got her back up without making her 300 again. She got to 60. Okay. That wasn't desirable. But we got back to 90, not to 210. Okay.
That's crazy.
Who said it was crazy?
Me.
What's your name, brother?
Henry?
Hunter. You think that's not?
No.
That's
No,
not what,
Henry.
say it again.
Henry. HENRY. Yeah.
Oh, cool, Henry. So when you correct the low, it goes way up.
Sometimes it does, but we usually overcorrect our
Okay.
lows.
All right. Well, we're not going to do that anymore. All right, Henry. I'm going to mute you, but don't take that personally. Henry, nice solid name. You don't hear it that often in a young man. Congratulations on your parents. Okay, this is going to work whether you're in an MDI or you're pumping. I'm not going to lie to you. It's going to be a little easier if you have a CGM, but not impossible if you don't. Okay. So this is not usually how I go through these slides. There we go. Here we go. We're getting into it now. That was the preamble. When your blood sugar is high or low, your insulin has been mistimed, miscalculated, or a combination of those two ideas. And now I'm going to explain to you how. So I found that a tug of war is a great way to explain it to people. And I need to remind myself of this, but we're going to make this hand for me food and body function. Okay, so now does everybody know that adrenaline, anxiety, stress can all make your blood sugar go up? I'm going to tell you that since my daughter's been home from school and doesn't have to go to school every day, her basal rate during the day went from 2.2 to 1. She needs 1.2 units an hour less basal because she's not at school. She tells me walking around looking at everybody going, oh my God, these kids are very annoying. So she's not annoyed anymore by people. And because of that, she needs half the basal she usually did. So, okay, so over here, we have insulin and we have anxiety and adrenaline, and you hope, your teacher doesn't yell at you and all the other things that affect your blood sugar. And over here are carbs. Okay, we're going to get into a tug of war. Now, here's what happens if you have a meal and you don't pre-bolus. If you don't pre-bolus, you start eating, and the food begins to pull your blood sugar up for 10 or 15 or 20 minutes. Even if you started a 90 blood sugar, you could be 110, 120, 160, depending on what you eat, 180 by the time the insulin starts to work. So insulin's not like a light switch, right? I can flip that switch and my light will go off. I can flip it again, it'll go on. But putting insulin in doesn't mean it's working full speed. It's just getting in there. It won't work as well if you're not hydrated. There's a thing nobody really thinks about. So when your parents are like, drink water, please stay hydrated, it's not just because they're irritating and they saw something on Facebook that told them that you should have 8 glasses of water a day. It's because insulin can't move through your cells if you're dehydrated. So let's say you're well hydrated and you start eating in 20 minutes and you put your insulin at the same time. I start eating, I put my insulin in. The food wins. Now you're 200, right? And for those of you who have a CGM, you'll know your blood sugar is going up probably like 2 points per minute. Well, then all of a sudden, 20 minutes in, the insulin starts to work, but it's not at full strength. So now it's pulling like this. It doesn't make you go down. It slows the rise, right? So you get 180, 190, 200, 210, 220, and then all of a sudden, the insulin's awake and it's working. But now you're 250. Now you're 250 and the insulin's pulling back, but it can't win anymore because back here, you bolused enough for a 90 blood sugar for, I don't know, 50 carbs. Let's say it's a big meal, okay? So you did your math and 50 carbs is 5 units, which for smaller people is probably sounds like a lot of insulin, but one day it won't be. And you didn't time it right. So now over here at 260, this is nowhere near enough insulin for 260 and momentum. You need enough insulin to stop the momentum, to address the 260 and bring it back to 90, and to cover the food. But all you put in was the insulin for the food. So then what happens? How long do you stare at it? 2 hours? Oh, it's going to come down. Something's going to happen. The diabetes fairy is going to come along at any second now, tap me on the head. My blood sugar is going to go right back to 90. Doesn't happen. I know we're young, but you're screwed by then, okay? By then, it's over. And if your blood sugar goes way up like that and comes crashing down again, that's even crazier. You've used way too much insulin and mistimed it. You probably think that meal takes 10 units, but in fact, it took 5. You just had it so unbalanced, it didn't work. Here's another way to handle that same meal. Now, keep this in mind before we talk about the meal. What if it's a 5-unit meal? You notice I'm not talking about carbs. We don't count carbs here, right? And I'll talk about that later with you, but we don't count carbs in my house. So it's a 5-unit meal, but you didn't pre-bolus, and now your blood sugar is way up here. What if, on top of that, your basal insulin should be 1 unit an hour, but instead it's 0.6? Okay? If that's the case, not only do you need the 5 units for the food, you're also replacing the missed insulin from your basal, 0.4, almost a half a unit an hour for every hour you've been alive before that. You're missing a half a unit an hour. Every hour. So you put in the 5 units, you want it to work on the food, then you don't pre-bolus and your basal's too low. That 5 units is nothing. You ever use insulin and say to yourself, it's like I didn't use insulin? That's why. Okay. So you have to think about this insulin like time travel a little bit, meaning, Caitlin, is that your name? Hi, you're adorable. Just know that and live your life happily. Okay. So just know that it's about time travel. Everything you do right now with insulin is not for now, it's for later. Okay. You don't bolus at 1 o'clock to get your blood sugar to go immediately from 200 to 100. That's going to make your blood sugar 100 an hour and a half from now. Now here's the time travel weirdness. And I know we all watch time travel movies. You watched, Endgame, Avengers, and you were like, that last thing didn't make a lot of sense because time travel's not real. But for our uses, we're going to make it real for a second. And I'm going to say something a little trippy. As much as insulin for now is for later, really, insulin from before is for now. It's a big difference and sounds like I'm saying the same thing using different words, but it's not. If I lay a blanket of basal insulin always before me, then everything that's happening to me is being met by this really well balanced blanket of basal insulin. Does that make sense? So it's about what I've done before, it controls now. And we'll talk about how to get your basal right, but for our little tug of war thing here, let's say your basal's right. Now, your blood sugar's 90. And instead of putting in the insulin and starting to eat, you put the insulin in and wait 10 minutes or 15 minutes. I don't know how long your pre-bolus time is going to be, and it's not always the same. It'll be longer if your blood sugar's higher. It'll be longer if you're not as well hydrated. It'll be longer at the end of your pump life than it would be at the beginning of your pump life. Infusion sets on your pump don't work as well towards the end sometimes as they do in the beginning. So there's all these variables to think about, but I'll talk about how not to have to think about too many of them in a little bit. But let's say we do our pre-bolus and it ends up being 20 minutes. So at noon, I put in my insulin, my blood sugar's 90, and 20 minutes later, I eat. But in 20 minutes, that insulin has started to come to life. It's starting to pull just very gently. And maybe your blood sugar's 80 now, right? If you have a CGM, even maybe it's diagonal down. This is weird with my hand, but maybe it's diagonal down, right? It's 20 minutes and the food goes in. Now you're 80 and you're 75. And then all of a sudden, what happens? The food kicks in and your body starts absorbing the food, sending the sugar from the food into your blood. And now this starts happening. And right about the time your blood sugar gets up to 90 again, the insulin is alive and it starts pulling as hard as it can as the food starts pulling as hard as it can, and neither of them can win. And eventually the insulin's gone and the food's digested and they both drop the rope and your blood sugar's still 90. That is an explanation of a straight line on a CGM. When you see people's line straight, that's what they did. That is all that they did. And it's not that hard to figure out. Okay. And it's super important. And this is something that I only say to kids that I don't say to adults. Although now, as I think about it, I should probably, by the way, I have the thing. It's my, anyway, I just like it. Not the point. So I'm going to say something sort of serious for a second. There is a person you're supposed to be, how you think and feel and react to things. And when your blood sugar is too high, those reactions and feelings are not the same as they are as when your blood sugar is lower. Darcy, you seem like you're smiling. I'm going to unmute you for a second. Hold on. Do you find your mood is different when your blood sugar is higher than when it's lower?
Absolutely.
Okay. So we're not, go ahead.
I'm an unbearable person when my blood sugar is above like 150.
And look at her. She seems delightful looking at her. But if she just doesn't pre-bolus, raging lunatic that nobody likes, right? Like take over here, right? Okay, you're getting unmuted now, or muted again. Thank you. So the point is this, is that if you didn't have diabetes, and you do, and there's nothing we can do about that, you'd get to be you, whatever you is. And I want you to be you as much as possible, right? I want you to be able to look back right now and think, I had a fight with a friend or my mom or somebody last week, and now that I consider it, my blood sugar was 250 when I did that. I bet you if your blood sugar was 100, you would have been a different person in that situation. You guys all deserve that. Everyone deserves that. Okay. My daughter, you, Caitlin, because she's adorable, the rest of you for other reasons. Okay. Everyone deserves that. And you need for that to mean enough to you to remember to pre-bolus. Okay. That's all that is. I know it sucks. You have to put in insulin before you eat. And somebody's going to say, well, what if I'm at a restaurant or what if I forget? There's ways to do it if you forget. It's not as good as remembering, but I'll tell you about them and you can talk about them with your parents moving forward. And by the way, everything I say here today is covered in a podcast episode that's me and a lovely woman named Jennifer Smith. She's a CDE and she's had diabetes for like 32 years. And we talk about all the ideas here broken down in different episodes, and they are absolutely listenable for younger people or parents or anyone. So, and they're free. Everything's free. The podcast it's ad supported. Someone else is paying for it. You'll never have to pay for it. Okay. So pre-bolusing, super important. Now, all carbs are not created equal, which means if I have 10 carbs of watermelon and 10 carbs of white rice, and I do a perfect pre-bolus and I put in 1 unit because that's how much I get for 10, again, made up number, a different thing's going to happen if I put that unit in, have my pre-bolus and eat the watermelon than is going to happen if I put that unit in with my pre-bolus and eat the rice. They punch at a different weight. I don't know another way to say that, and you guys are young and boxing's not very popular anymore, so I'll try to put it a different way. For those of you who watch baseball, do you ever see someone hit a ball? They don't look like they're swinging any harder than anybody else, but it goes like 70 feet farther than everyone else, right? And it sounds different coming off of their bat. Well, some carbs have that power, but you don't have to guess which ones they are because we can tell you. There's something called the glycemic load, and the glycemic index is a very boring thing that at some point your doctor said in front of you and you totally ignored because it sounded like some bull that you did not care about, okay? But it's super important to know, is this a potato? Is it a mashed potato? Is it pasta? Or is this broccoli and chicken? And by the way, chicken doesn't have carbs in it, right? So nobody boluses for chicken, but see somebody shaking their head, protein makes your blood sugar go up later and fat keeps your blood sugar up. So a lot of the things that you're eating and you're like, yo, this is free because the doctor told me that was just because it was the 3rd day of diabetes and they really didn't want you to freak out. Okay. But you're going to need some insulin for fat and protein. So now just knowing that, think about all the times that you saw these stuck blood sugars, right? That were at 160 and wouldn't move. And you're like, this doesn't make any sense. Now maybe it makes a little more sense. Now, I don't expect you to go to some website and learn every food's glycemic load and glycemic index. That's just weird. And I'm not about being weird about diabetes, okay? But I am into you paying attention to historical things that happen to your blood sugars. Here's what I mean by that. If tonight you have meatloaf and potatoes and there's gravy on it and broccoli, and you count all the carbs up and you're 100% right somehow. Let's pretend you're 100% right and that meal was definitely 53 carbs and you were right. And you do your pre-bolus and your basal's right, but your blood sugar goes up to 180. It sits there long enough that it makes you think, oh, I have to correct this. So you give yourself a unit and then your blood sugar goes back down and you don't get low. That's cool. But next week, when your mom makes the same meal again, if you count those carbs and put the 5 units in and not 6, I'm going to come to wherever you live and bang your head into the refrigerator or something. Okay. Learn from what's happening. You have to trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen. If that meal took 5 units, it made a 180 and another unit corrected it. Next time, put the unit over here with the other 5 and stop this rise from ever happening. Just remember that. This could be an indication that your insulin to carb ratio is wrong. It could just be an indication that your body doesn't deal as well with potatoes. Okay. You can't just say, oh, one time it didn't work, but it works for all my other meals. I'll just ignore it when I eat this. That's not okay. We're not doing that. If that carb ratio works great for most of your meals, but doesn't work great for Fruit Loops, then guess what? Fruit Loops needs more insulin. Doesn't mean you have to change all your ratios. Doesn't mean you have to go tell your endocrinologist, oh my God, I don't understand. Like, it's all so good most of the time, but then I eat Fruit Loops and my blood sugar goes way up. Think of the common sense of this. If every day you got up in the morning and kicked a box in the middle of your room, would you call a doctor and tell them about the box you keep kicking? Or would you move the box? Okay, right? Simple stuff. If it's too much insulin, you're getting low, use less. If it's not enough insulin, you're getting high, use more. But you have to look at historical data, things that have happened to you before. When they keep happening, at some point, you got to say to yourself, this is going to keep happening. I have to be different here. So we don't count carbs here. I look at a plate, and I wish you could hear my brain when I do it. Sometimes in the podcast, I'll say it out loud, but I'll just look down and I'll be like, that's 12, that's 10, this is 15, blah, blah, this is 55. Let's do 60, right? Like, just like that. On social media the other day, I put up a picture of my daughter's breakfast, which was a piece of toast with an avocado and an orange. And I asked people to guess the carbs. And it was a very popular post for some reason. I don't completely understand why, but maybe I do. Almost everyone got it wrong, and by a significant amount. Okay. There were 56 carbs in those three things, and most people guessed 30 to 35. That's a big difference when you're measuring your insulin. If it was 56 carbs and you get a half a unit for every 5 or something, it's like 2.5 units, and you miss it by 20%, you're going to give yourself like 1.7 units instead of 2.5, and your blood sugar is going to get higher. Here was the next step to this. The avocado has fat in it. If I told you right now, bet your life savings, everything that the tooth fairy has ever left for you, if an avocado needed insulin, you'd say no. But an avocado has 12 carbs in it. And it has fat in it that over time will hold your blood sugar up. So it's very boring, but when you have fat, it makes your body less efficient when it's digesting. So the carbs stay in your stomach longer. So imagine the food is like a carb bomb, okay? And the carb bomb goes down in your stomach and it's slowly giving off carbs. It only happens till it's digested and it's gone. But if you have pizza, the dough in the pizza is a lot of carbs, right? But that's not why you're high 3 hours later after pizza. You're high 3 hours later after pizza because of the fat in the cheese or the fat in the meat. That's what's slowing down the digestion of the bread, keeping your carb bomb in there longer and spreading out the impact of those carbs over many hours after you've eaten. Does that make sense to everybody? Am I going too fast? All right. We're doing well. And by we, I mean me. I don't know what you're doing. But I'm very comfortable about how this is happening. Okay. So there are too many variables for you to think that there's rules about diabetes. If I just follow these rules, it's always going to happen, because I bet you guys have all followed the rules, right? And does it ever work out? Like, anybody who's super happy with their A1C and they don't have any spikes, could you raise your hand real quick? All right, Darcy, don't show off. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. That's nice. Okay. But you guys, in a week, like, remember this. Hold on. I don't usually get to do this when I'm presenting. Remember this. In a couple of days, that could be you. It's not unfathomable. It could really happen. So I'm not saying just guess your carbs today. I'm saying learn. Teach yourself. That meal is 20 carbs. If every meal's off, then maybe change your insulin to carb ratio, right? If every time you're a unit light, cool. Then fix your ratio so that doesn't happen anymore. And again, trust that what you know is going to happen is going to happen. Learn from what you've seen happen before. Okay. Now, who's been in a fist fight? Caitlin, you ever punch a girl for talking bad to you? No? I know in the 2020s, they don't let kids hit each other anymore. But Caitlin, in the 70s, you could punch anybody you wanted. It was a free and happy time. Okay, so has anybody ever really been in a fight? Mike, you could help me here. You're an older gentleman, never punch a man over something. Okay, thank you very much. Would you rather Mike get hit first or hit second, or would you like to hit? When do you want to punch, first or second?
I want to punch first.
Okay, all right. Now, For those of you who listen or watch professional sports, there's a thing that they say about dictating the pace. Has anyone ever heard that phrase? They got out on defense and they're really dictating the pace today. They're playing hard. It looks like they're going to play their game. All that bull that you hear people say during a sporting event, because really they have nothing to say. But the truth is, if you're going to get into a fight, you'd rather punch first. And here's why. Because what happens next, you made happen. You dictated what happens next. You've put that person on defense. Now, to take it away from a fight and bring it into diabetes, I'd rather see you make a bolus that's a little too heavy and get a little low and fix it than to wait for diabetes to hit you and then running around all day in your house going, I don't know what's happening. My blood sugar's been high all day. This doesn't make any sense. And everyone gets stuck in that conversation, right? This doesn't make sense. I don't know what's happening. Then you start running through the list. Who, when their blood sugar gets high, says to themselves, I must be getting a cold. I'm probably getting sick, right? How many of you have ever said, my period must be coming? Or this pump must be old. It's probably my insulin. Has anyone ever considered throwing out their insulin? Yeah, it's not your insulin, okay? Your insulin's been in your refrigerator all month. It worked fine 3 days ago. It's still fine, okay? It could be your insulin, but it's probably not. And there are a lot of other things to consider before you start throwing your insulin away. We're saying these words. Oh, that must just be diabetes. That's just diabetes. There's nothing I can do about that. I want you to know that in most situations, it's never just diabetes. When you find yourself thinking that, what you should be saying to yourself is, I do not know how my insulin works. I'm not using my insulin correctly. If I was, this wouldn't be happening. Now, if your pump site's bad, that's one thing. If you really are sick and you have the flu, then what you expect to happen probably won't happen. But in most situations, day to day, if you're not getting the response that you expect when you're using insulin, you're probably just not using it right. Okay? So the important thing to do here is to punch first. You want to put in a pre-bolus. So you can say to yourself, well, you know what? I pre-bolus for this meal, but my blood sugar still went to 150. Next time, I'll do it a little sooner. Or maybe I'll do a little more or a little less or a little later. But at least the next decision gets to be yours. When you don't know what happened, when you're covered up just hoping diabetes doesn't kick your ass, you can't tell what's going on. You're just trying to survive. To bring it into the 2000s, anyone ever seen MMA? When the guy, you're nodding your head, man, but I don't think your name's Marilyn, so I don't know how to talk to you. But dude, when the guy covers up, it's over, right? Yeah. Once you go like this, you're in trouble, okay? But the guy who's moving forward, who's throwing hands and trying to go first, usually does a lot better. So be a little aggressive with your decisions, because at least the next thing that happens, you made happen. And when you made it happen, you'll know how to change it. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay. Everybody see this on their CGMs, right? The roller coaster. Once you get on it, it's really hard to get off, right? You just keep chasing and chasing and chasing. You're chasing your blood sugar, literally, because you're trying to make a decision right now with insulin and you want it to work right now. You're flying up and you want it to stop, but it's too late. You're 250. It's flying down and you try to turn off your basal or something like that. It's too late. If you never get high, you won't get high. Right, Henry? The best way to not do something is to never do it. But if it does happen, and it can happen, when it happens, you smash it like a bug and start over. Do not stare at high blood sugars for 3 hours, hoping they're going to come down. I'd rather see you get it down and have to catch that fall with some juice or something than to stare at it. It becomes too normal then. You get a little out of your mind because your blood sugar's higher. You get a little complacent. You get sleepy. It's harder to care, right? So stop it from happening. I'm going to tell you that my daughter's friend, who I don't think is in here, she's not. I helped her. She has diabetes. She's 15. And she told me that she and her mother are getting along so much better now that her blood sugars are stable. She was fighting with her mom a lot, and now she doesn't anymore. And just like that could cause a problem for your personal life, when you're trying to make this complicated decision about insulin, your blood sugar's been 250 for a while, it's hard to care. right? Has anybody ever gotten so low that they're like, oh, I'm so low, I have to drink a juice or I'm gonna die? Oh well. Right, you just sort of get that like feeling of like, whatever. Like that's your brain not working right. For a second to understand that the fuel your brain uses to stay on is, hold on. Caitlin, what are you, like 9?
Almost 11.
Wow, congratulations. Listen to me. If I said to you, the fuel your brain uses to work is blank, do you know what it is?
Insulin.
Sugar.
Oh, sugar. Oh.
Okay, don't be, it's okay. You weren't going to know. No one knew. That's why we're bringing it up, okay? You're going away again, Caitlin. Bye. So your brain needs a certain amount of sugar to work. Too much, it doesn't work so well. Too little, it doesn't work so well. In the sweet spot, it works great. Okay? You deserve to be yourself. Staying off of the roller coaster by making the decisions first is a great way to have that experience in your life. Okay? Be bold. Just be brave, okay, about your insulin. This is a different one, and this is in here. I usually wouldn't bring this up, but it's part of the thing. When you say to your doctor, like, hey, I want to get an insulin pump or I want to get a CGM, they go, no, you can't. Say why. Don't say okay. All right. Because there are a lot of reasons why doctors' offices don't want to do things. And a lot of the times those reasons are they just don't know how to use the pump. So they're afraid to give it to you because they feel like they can't train you on it or something like that. You need a good, solid reason. This is your diabetes. You can make decisions for yourself. If you want a pump, get a pump. Don't let a doctor tell you you can't have a pump. You want a CGM, get one. Don't let them tell you you can't have one. If you want to try a different insulin, cool. Don't let them tell you no, okay? Now, if there's a real great medical reason for the no, then all right, then let's hear it. But don't just tell me no and walk away from me. Okay. So I'm going to tell you a few stories here. I'm going to make you guys a little smaller so I can see a little better. You want to hear a funny story or a nice story first? Let's start with nice, and then we'll roll into funny, okay? Michael is a 17-year-old hockey player. The top one is the day I met his mom, and the bottom one is like 4 days later. Michael's biggest problem was that during sports, he couldn't keep his blood sugar up, but if he drank something with sugar in it, he'd go way too high. So we actually ended up figuring out that when Michael skates out onto the ice, one time it's water. When he comes back, the next time it's Gatorade. The next time it's water. The next time it's Gatorade. So as his blood sugar tried to go down because of the activity, the Gatorade would bring him up, but never too far. It was just this tiny little thing he did that made a huge difference for himself. My point is you guys can all play sports, okay? Once your basal's right and you're bolusing correctly, you can be as active as playing. There's probably nothing more active than ice hockey. It's incredibly difficult. It's incredibly strenuous. And he's doing it. Now, this other one is kind of funny. I can't point to it because I'm not with you, but the graph that's just bouncing up and down like this at around 11:09 a.m. when it's as high as it has been, that's like 400. That's when I literally got on the phone with the lady whose son this was. And I think this boy was about 7 years old. And she said, somebody told me you can help me. My son's blood sugar goes from 60 to 400, 60 to 400, and had been doing that for years, like years. And she had just fed him Cheerios down when he was low around 7 a.m. and he shot right up to 400. I gave her the whole talk that I'm giving you today, right? And we get to go off the phone. And she says, let me ask you for help for a second. He's hungry again. He wants to have lunch. What should I do? And I said, well, what do you want to do? And she goes, I'm going to feed him now. And then and I was like, oh my God, we just talked for like 45 minutes about this. And like, then you're going to go right back to doing the thing you did before. I said, no. How would you like to do a little experiment with a stranger on the telephone with your son's life? And she goes, sure. Because that's how messed up she was with diabetes. She was willing to do something incredibly stupid that she shouldn't do. So I asked her a question at 11 o'clock in the morning and his kid's blood sugar is 400. I said, how much insulin makes your son's blood sugar 100 right now? And she started talking about his insulin to carb ratios. And I was like, I don't care about all that. I'm like, just tell me your best guess. How much insulin fixes this? And she said 1 unit. I was like, great. How much insulin does he need for his lunch? And she started talking about carbs. And I was like, I don't care. Just in your brain, how much do you think? And she said 1.5 units. I was like, okay, great. Give him 2.5 units right now. So she gave him the 2.5 units, and she's like, and now feed him. And I said, oh, no, no. Now we're going to wait. Now we're going to wait and see what happens. So 45 minutes later, this kid's blood sugar was 270. She was going to feed him and give him the insulin after, and just the unit and a half. She wasn't going to give him a correction. We had given him 2.5 units, and 45 minutes later, he had gone from 400 to 270. So now we're back on the phone again, and she's in a panic. I should let him eat. I'm going to give him the food. I was like, do not give him the food yet. We're going to wait. So he goes 270, 260, starts falling faster. All of a sudden, the arrow in his CGM points straight down, which now means he's dropping like 2 or 3 points a minute. And he's falling. He gets to like 220. And I said, go ahead, give him the food. So the kid eats his lunch. I don't remember what it was. 220, 2 hours down happens for a while. 220, 210, 200, 190, 180, 170. And then all of a sudden it started slowing down. It was still dropping by 10 points, but not every 5 minutes. And so in that moment, what I saw was the food started catching the insulin. So this is important because most of the time when you think about your diabetes, you think about the insulin having an impact on the number, right? It's about giving yourself insulin to change a number or to stop a number. But have you ever thought about how the food impacts the insulin or how the insulin impacts the food? Not just the number. Forget the number. What's happening inside of you? So we created this free fall with his blood sugar and then put food in and caught it. And it was like opening up a parachute on his blood sugar. It started to slow down as it fell. And its slowing down was just the opposite of the tug of war we talked about earlier, right? Instead of putting in the insulin first and letting the insulin gain momentum and let the food come online and drag it back to the middle, we let the insulin gain a crazy amount of momentum because he had so far to go. And then when the food kicked in, it brought him down slowly. So now this is working great. And his blood sugar gets to about, if I remember right, around 100 or 90. And there was still an arrow down. And I started thinking, we use too much insulin here. I was a little worried, right? This kid was all the way in like Colorado. And I'm in New Jersey. So I was like, So I said to her, let's give him a few sips of juice. I just wanted a little more faster insulin, right? You know, juice gets absorbed right through the lining of your cheek. It hits you faster, right? So let's give him a little fast acting juice. I want to take that arrow away. And she says, I swear to you, she says, we don't keep juice in the house. And I was like, wait, what? And I must have made a face because my wife said, what was wrong? And I covered the phone and I said, I just killed a kid in Colorado. All right. And she's like, what? I'm like, this lady doesn't have any juice. I was like, what kind of a person doesn't have juice? They got diabetes. I don't understand. So I get back on the phone. I'm like, well, do you have some other kind of like fast acting insulin or fast acting carb? She goes, we like to treat with jelly beans. I was like, yeah, I don't care what you like. Do you have something liquid? And she goes, oh, we have lemonade. And I said, does the lemonade have sugar in it? And she goes, yes. And I said, lady, let's not argue about what juice is. Okay. Like just give the kid the thing. So the kid, she says, how much? And I'm like, I don't care. A few sips. We just want to stop the arrow. That's all. So you can't just take a sip of insulin or a sip of juice and instantly change your blood sugar. But in this situation, the food was already slowing things down, right? The food was way ahead. It was just not quite as ahead as we needed it. So he takes a couple of sips of juice. The kid's blood sugar levels out like this. It goes to 72 and it gets super flat, 72. Now, when that happens, I'm running around my house with my hands up, proclaiming that I'm the best at this ever. Okay. I'm telling anybody who will listen, my mom, my wife, I would have called someone on the phone. I'm so good at this. I got this kid's 400 blood sugar to be 70 with a meal in an hour and a half. I was feeling good about myself. Then the lady says, I'm not comfortable with his blood sugar being 72. I'm going to give him some jelly beans. And I was like, no, we just got it here. I was like, please just let it sit for a while. I think this is okay. And she agreed and got off the phone. And 20 minutes later, she called me back to tell me his blood sugar was 220. And it was going up. And I said, I don't understand. That shouldn't be. I said, he should have gotten low, not high, if anything was going to happen. But you know what happened, right? She gave him the jelly beans. And then we started all over again. Now, 6 months later, because this lady was a hard case, she's got that nice flat graph with him too. It took her longer to believe it, but it's about the timing and the amount of the insulin. So once she believed it, it worked for her. Okay, can everybody see this? This is a breakfast from when my daughter was younger. So when my daughter was younger, we used to have her high range at like 170, and it's not because she was younger, it was because I wasn't as good at this as I was before, as I am now. But what I'm going to tell you is for those of you who have a CGM, whatever your high range is, please don't tell me it's over 180 because you don't want to hear that thing beep, okay? That thing's beeping to tell you your blood sugar is getting high. It's like the only reason it exists, okay? You have to let it beep, and I'll tell you why in a second, but let me walk through this meal a little bit. So this was an overnight sleepover. A lot of my daughter's friends were over, and the night before, her friend Shay said, "Hey, Mr. Benner, can we have waffles tomorrow with powdered sugar?" And I was like, okay. And then another girl goes, "I like bananas with it." And then another girl said something else. And before I knew it, there were the like carbiest things ever. And then one girl goes, "Not waffles, French toast." And I'm like, all right. So overnight, Arden's blood sugar was a little low. So you see off the side there. But on that chart, it was really only 70. Now I would be like, woo, 70. But back then I was like, a little too low. So I didn't give her food. I just shut her basal off on her pump for a half an hour, right? Because everything I do for now is for later. So when I shut her basal off, that doesn't happen right away. It's not a light switch, right? But just like a pre-bolus, it takes time for the insulin to start working. And just like a pre-bolus, it takes time for the insulin to stop working, for it to get out of your system. So I shut it off here so that an hour later, there'd be a black hole where there was no insulin present in my daughter at all. And as soon as that number hit that black hole, like, because what was happening until then is her basal was holding her down. That's basal's job. It's its only job. But I cheated a little bit and I gave basal a second job. And I turned it off in the future. So it's holding her down like this, and she's moving along through time. And all of a sudden, the basal disappears. And what happens? The blood sugar starts to go up because there's nothing holding it down anymore. But I only turned it off for 30 minutes. So it only made a small gap of time where she didn't have a basal impact. So she starts going back up, then the basal comes back again and she catches. Now she gets higher than I want her to get again. So as she's getting ready to wake up, I think, wow, we're going to have all this stuff with this carbs in it. I want to start getting her blood sugar back down towards 100 so I have a fighting chance with all this French toast. So I start bumping her blood sugar just a little bit, a 0.6. Half hour later, didn't do anything, 0.4, 0.3. Now I realize we're going to cook soon, so I'm pushing it down, right? Then while I'm cooking and her blood sugar is 110 or 20-ish, I give her a unit. Then she starts eating. Then I start seeing how much she's going to eat, because it's not like I'm going to be like, have one slice of this and half a banana and a teaspoon of powdered sugar. That's no way to live. Okay. So she starts eating. I make a guess that this unit is enough for what I know she's going to eat. Like, I trust what I know. She might not eat 5 pieces of French toast, but I know she's going to eat 1. So I bolus for what I can kind of trust she's going to eat. And then as I see her eating and she adds powdered sugar, which is not something she normally does, I start temp basal increasing. I double her basal for an hour. Why? Because basal's job is to hold you stable, okay? And in a normal situation, whatever your body is doing, say you're 1 unit an hour of basal, or you're half, or you're 0.2, or whatever it is, it works for most situations. But if you're going to be in a haunted house for an hour and a half and you're going to be scared the whole time, that unit's not going to keep your blood sugar down if you're really genuinely scared. You might need a heavier basal insulin while you're in there. If you're going to go play softball or work out at the gym, you might need less basal insulin while you're working there. That blanket might need to be heavier or lighter in that time. And I decided, because there were going to be all these crazy carbs going, I wanted a heavier blanket of insulin through this meal. I doubled her basal. She says, I want more French toast. I immediately give her more insulin. I do this thing where I pretend I'm getting her the French toast, but I get it for everybody else first to get some sort of a pre-bolus going. Then I give her the French toast. She has another banana, so I give her more insulin. And look, Look 3 hours later at noon with a finger stick, not just the CGM. Her blood sugar's 97. And you see what happened with there. As a little kid back then, with 2 pieces of French toast, powdered sugar, a banana. I think she had grapes and because Shay wanted it, chocolate milk, which is not something my daughter ever drinks. And I didn't know what I was doing. But what I did was I created such a heavy blanket of insulin and spread it out over the timeline of the food. The food couldn't win. It wasn't so much insulin that she was going to get low. It was just enough to keep her from getting high. Now, I know when you look at this, it seems like a lot of work. I want you to believe me when I tell you that all those decisions in there took up about 4 minutes of my time in my brain. And one day, that's how it'll work for you. One day, you'll just be like, French toast, that's 5 units. I'm going to have another one. I'm going to throw on 3 more units. You know what it's going to be? I'm doing the powdered sugar today instead of not, so I'm going to put my basil up a little bit. Those things will just come to you one day, okay? Not today. Today isn't going to happen. Don't start with French toast and bananas and chocolate milk tomorrow and be like, I talked to the guy on the podcast, and he's like, just use more, because you'll screw it up, okay? But you can get to it, is my point. Now, how do you get to it? Well, the bumping and nudging is a big idea. So I want to talk to you for, usually you guys are little, you're not of driving age, so this is going to be a little strange for you, but when you're driving down the street and your car, you ever notice your mom stops paying attention and the car just starts to like veer off the road a little bit, like real slowly? It just, Casey, why are you laughing? Does your mom like a terrible driver, or did something happen in the room? The car just starts going a little bit off, and all of a sudden you're hitting the little line on the side of the road. When that happens, you don't turn the wheel like a ton, because if you do that, the car will like shoot back like this, right? You just sort of bump the wheel back a little bit. So you're getting off course and you just bump it back. By making a small turn, you get back to straight. You don't go crazy out into the other lane. So the reason that your limits on your CGM are so important is because if you don't get high, you won't get high. And the way to stop that is to know before it happens. So I want one day for you, I want your alarm to be at 120, okay? High alarm at 120. And why? Because when it beeps at 120, it only takes a little bit of insulin to bring it back to 90. To turn a 120 diagonal up into 90 is a little bit of insulin. So little insulin that it is very unlikely to make you low later. So you just bump it back. That's it. If you wait till you're 150, it's going to take more insulin. If you wait till you're 180 or 200, it's going to take a lot of insulin. So much insulin that it's going to overpower whatever body function brought you up here, or lack of basal that brought you up here. It's going to overpower that and make you low. And then you're not going to have the nerve to just eat 5 carbs or 3 jelly beans, because you don't want to get too low. Then you're on the roller coaster, and now it's started. Okay? So beep, beep, beep. No, 90, done. Similarly, 70 or 80 or whatever you want your low to be, when you get to 80, I want to know now. I don't want to know when I'm 50. I want to know when I'm 80, so I can have a bite of something. Or if I haven't had insulin for a long time, maybe I can just shut my basal off for a little while and bring myself back up again. There's ways to bump and nudge with food, and there's ways to bump and nudge with insulin to keep yourself on the road. Not too high, not too low. Not in the weeds, not in the other lane. Does that make sense to everybody? I'm kind of impressed with myself, because Casey was talking to somebody earlier, but now she's listening. So either someone yelled at her, or I'm starting to make sense. Don't tell me, Casey. Let me feel like it was me making sense, okay? Thank you. I'm going to put a little list up here to kind of go back over what we've talked about a little bit. You got to understand how the insulin works in you. And the only way to figure that out is experimenting over and over again. It's not going to go great tomorrow, but it'll go better 3 days from now. It's going to go even better a week from now, and even better a month from now. It works. The drama and fear thing, if you do it, please stop. Please stop going, oh my God, my blood sugar, it's always going high. I don't know what to do. Everything sucks. I can't believe I have diabetes. Like, stop that, okay? Because here's why. While something's going wrong, it's a great moment to figure out why it went wrong. And so every time something goes not the way you want, because don't think of it as wrong. Think of it as not the way you want. Every time you don't have the outcome you expected, Step back a little bit and say to yourself, what did I do here that didn't work for me? Is it my pre-bolus? Is it the amount of insulin I used? It's something, right? That is an example, not a mistake. You can't figure out what you're doing without seeing it. It would be like trying to learn algebra without anybody ever explaining it to you, with just somebody saying like, oh, it's a number and a letter, and when you add them together, it turns into a triangle. And you're like, what? Like, right? Like, you need to see it. So when you see this happen or this happen, you figure it out. So the reason I figured out to do that is because very long time ago, and I'm going to make sure I stop in time to let guys ask questions, but a very long time ago, before CGMs were a thing, my daughter's endocrinologist tried to get us to get one, and I didn't know what it was. And she explained it to me like this. She said, there's an 18-year-old boy in the practice who loves M&Ms. And when he eats M&Ms, his blood sugar goes up and it stays high. And he thinks if he has this data, this understanding of his blood sugar, he can fix it. So he goes home with his CGM and he buys those little grab bags of M&Ms that you can get in the grocery store. And the first day he does the thing he does all the time. And his blood sugar goes up and it stays up. So the next day he thinks, oh, I just need more insulin. So the next day he gives himself more insulin. It doesn't go quite as high. So he's like, well, this is it. A little more insulin. I'm all set. So the third day does it, and he starts to head up and crashes low. And instead of giving up, he realized that there was something in there about the timing. And so he started messing with it a little sooner, a little later, a little more, a little less. And then one day, before he got through his 8 bags of M&Ms, one day he ate his M&Ms, gave himself his insulin, and his blood sugar never moved. And when the endo told me that story, I thought, I bet you I could do that with everything. And then I learned how to do it with everything. And you guys can too. It's really not that hard. I promise you it's not that hard. There are a lot of kids that listen to this podcast. And besides my dumb dad jokes and stupid stuff I say it's inappropriate that their parents let them listen to anyway, they get a lot of good advice. A lot of good information about type 1 diabetes. So don't be dramatic. Don't be like, oh, that's just diabetes. There's nothing I can do about it. It's a learning experience. You'll learn from it, and then you'll make a different decision next time, and it won't go the same way. It'll go better. Trust what you know is going to happen is going to happen. I used 5 for this meal last week. I got high. I corrected with 1. This meal is 6. Trust that, okay? Now, get your basal insulin right, because everything we've talked about for the last hour won't work if your basal's wrong. If your basal should be a half a unit an hour and it's a unit an hour, what'll happen? You'll be low all the time, right? Well, the same thing is if it's supposed to be a unit an hour and you only have it at 0.7 or 0.6 or 0.5, you're going to be high all the time. The truth is, if your basal's right, your blood sugar should be like 80 to 90 all the time without food or boluses. Is everyone here's blood sugar always 80 or 90 when they're not eating? Your basal's not right. Oh, Darcy, you listen to she just listens to the podcast. Why are you here? Okay, it's fine. So the point is, my point isn't that I want your blood sugar to always be 85. My point is that if it's always 180, more basal will make it 150. If it's always 150, more basal will make it 130. You can keep adjusting it till you get to where you want to be comfortably, okay? That's your decision to make. But don't look at 180 and go, there's nothing I can do about this. There's plenty you can do about it. You can get your basal insulin right, okay? You have to. Because like I said, if your basal's a half a unit not strong enough, then your bolus isn't going to work the way you expect. And then nothing's going to make sense. Then you're going to be covering up and wondering why you're getting your ass kicked by diabetes. And there's no secret. Why is it happening? Because you're using the wrong amount of insulin at the wrong time. That's it. Okay. Glycemic load and glycemic index just means learn how foods impact your blood sugar and make adjustments to meet those problems. Has anybody ever been told not to stack insulin? Okay. It's not stacking if you need it. That's bolusing. Okay. Using too much insulin all the time is stacking. It's sort of an outdated idea if you have a CGM. It's a way they kept people from hurting themselves and bolusing too much, right? Because imagine this is 20 years ago and we don't have all these thoughts about insulin and how blood sugars work. It would be a smart thing to tell people, don't stack up a bunch of insulin on top of each other. You're going to get low. You will, and don't stack insulin. but it's not stacking if you need it. Okay. This I think about every day. You have to think about this. It's how I live around using insulin. I'd rather stop a low or falling blood sugar than fight with a high one. It has to be your core belief. I'd rather take a couple sips of a juice box while I'm learning this to turn my 80 diagonal down back into a 90 than to mess all day with a 190 or a 250. I'd rather be a little lower than a little high. I'd rather stop a lower falling blood sugar. It's a mindset. I don't know if that means something to all you younger kids, but it's just it's the way I live. I think that first. Please stop complaining about pre-bolusing. It sucks. We all know it sucks. It's not going to stop sucking. Bitching about it's not going to make it suck less. Okay, just do it. Blood sugar going to really be much better. A1C going to go down a lot. Dude, my daughter's A1C is 5.2 right now, right? She had pasta last night. The night before, we had Chinese food. There was pizza on Saturday. It's cool. You can do it, okay? It's not hard. Well, wait, it is hard, but you'll get it one day, and then it won't feel hard. There, sorry about that. Please don't stare at high blood sugars. Use more insulin if you're high. Get yourself down, get yourself level, and start over again. Don't stare at highs. It's high, get it down, get it stable, start over. Stay off the roller coaster, bump and nudge with food and with insulin. That could mean a temp basal increase, a temp basal decrease, a small bolus, 3 jelly beans. When you open up the gummy things, the little pouches, you don't have to eat them all, right? Maybe 2, maybe 4. See how it works. Make experiments, figure it out. Temporary basal rate increases and decreases will end up being something that you'll use moving forward. It's probably not something you use right now, but keep them in mind. Steal overnight A1C. You're asleep, you're not eating. It's the easiest time to keep your blood sugar stable, right? Unless you've got way too much insulin coming into your sleep or not enough insulin coming into your sleep, overnight is it's cake. So find a place where you're stable and feeling good, and that's it. If you average a 5 overnight and a 6.5 during the day, your A1C is still going to be under 6. And then once you learn how to do it overnight, take what you've learned overnight and start applying it to the daytime hours. As a matter of fact, if you're going to make adjustments, starting overnight is really the simplest place to start, because then you'll get a good idea of what your basal should be. And then you can move that to the daytime. Last thing before we move on is, again, it's not a mistake. Don't beat yourself up. It's not going to go right immediately. It's actionable data that you can learn from. Every time something goes wrong, pretend it's not you for a minute. Step away from it and think, I bet you if I just pre-bolus 5 minutes sooner, this would have been different. I bet you if I just used another half a unit of insulin, this would have been different. And then try it again the next time. Okay. So this is a list of episodes that people who listen to the podcast give me and say that if you listen to these 10 episodes, you'll think about diabetes the way I do. You don't have to, because honestly, I've put all these ideas together in one place. So I told you about Jenny earlier. Jenny and I have done something called Ask Scott and Jenny, where people send in questions and Jenny and I answer them. We did something called Define Diabetes, because a lot of the terms that we use during the day around diabetes, not everybody always knows them. They're like 10 minutes long, and it's like, hey, pre-bolus, what is it? And it's explained to you. But there are these like 15 or 20 episodes that are called Diabetes Pro Tip. And it goes through everything we just talked about. In 20 hours of listening, I bet your A1C would go down 1.5 points. And so there's actually a link now. If you don't want to mess with a podcast player, you can go to diabetesprotip.com and they're all there. But I want to, before we get to the questions, if you don't mind, Darcy, have I said anything to these people today that you have found to be untrue based on your experience?
No.
Okay. Okay. You're going away. Now, guys, Mike's here. Mike's not a teen, but I'm sure he was recently. Mike, could you share with all these kids what your A1C was before you found the podcast and what it is now?
Yeah, my A1C was 7.2, I believe. Been listening to podcasts for a few months now and dialing in with what you're talking about, bumping and nudging, and you're right. It's not a lot of thought process anymore. I'm down to just checked it the other day on Night Scout, and it's always right where my A1Cs are, and that's 5.7.
Ah, congratulations. That is really cool.
Thank
So
you.
from an adult to a teen to you guys, it's doable. Okay. It's not impossible. It's just making slightly different decisions and not fighting with your parents. And now that's the last thing I want to say, especially to some of you younger guys. If your parents are listening to the podcast, then coming back to you and being like, the guy on the podcast said, I can't imagine how annoying that must be. It must be terrible, right? Let's just do this. Marilyn, I'm assuming that's not your name, but go ahead. Unless, you know what? I'm so sorry. It's 2020. Are you Marilyn?
No, my name's Joe. It's just not my computer. That's
All
my
right.
mom.
I am.
That's my mom.
So, hi, how are you, Marilyn?
Good. How are
So-
you?
Good, thanks. So you nodded a little bit. Your mom says, I heard this thing on the podcast and it's a pain in
All
the
the
ass.
time.
Okay, all right.
All the time.
I apologize for that, okay? I feel bad about it. Sometimes I meet men in person and it's usually their wives who are like, this guy, she will not leave me alone. But the
You
truth,
really don't have to apologize because my A1C is great. So
oh, okay, cool. Anyway, my point was, sorry, I'm going to mute you again, Joe, because you're echoing. To the rest of you, your parents, this is kind of important. It's back to like when we're talking about there's a way you deserve to feel. Your parents have been given tools by probably a doctor that they believed in, and they had no reason not to believe in them. And then they came home and tried it with you, and it didn't go very well. And soon they start saying, oh, we're going to try this, right? Or we're going to try that, or we're going to stop eating cereal. And they start making all these changes and nothing ever really fixes it. And so eventually I imagine, I'm going to pop you on for a second here. Trine, is your blood sugar exactly where you want it to be?
No, not really. But today's the first day I started talking, like listening to you. So
Cool. So
Yeah.
have you seen your parents try to help you and it hasn't really done what you were hoping?
a few times, but
Okay. So my point is, welcome. I hope you listen. Thank you for being here. So what I wanted to the point I'm trying to make is that I know your parents have said things to you and that it hasn't gone the way that they thought, but it's not because they're not trying. They're trying really hard. They've been given these tools and ideas by doctors. It's not working, but this has a fairly good chance of working. Okay. And I want to take you back again to the beginning. 4 to 6 of these a day through email, Instagram, my website, all different ways. I know people like to say diabetes is different for everybody, and I get how they think that, but the way insulin works, that's the same for everybody. So if you make these decisions around insulin, you should get the outcomes that you expect. So if your parents have been trying to get you to do this and you've been a little resistant, you're like, I don't want to pre-bolus, or shut up, I don't care. They're texting you and asking what your blood sugar is. And you're like, what's the big deal? Why can't they wait? They can't wait because they're trying to stop a 120 from being a 150, because this is way different than this. So if you can cut them a break for a month or two, I guarantee things will get easier and it won't feel as kind of irritating as maybe it does in the beginning. So, one day, I hope that you find me on Instagram and tag me like these people did to tell me what your A1C was or how things are going, or show me a graph, because these happen all day long too, okay? And they could be you. It really could. It's not hard. So I have 15 minutes left before my family comes up here and like wants to know why I'm not making them dinner, okay? So if you have any questions, just kind of like wave with your hand and unmute yourself, and I'll do my best to answer them. This is usually the weird part where no one asks a question. So, okay, Jessica, go ahead. I got you.
Okay. So here's my question. My daughter's 3. Her sugars have definitely improved since I started listening to your podcast. I've Instagrammed you many a times. I just want to know, she's just started on the Omnipod probably a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. And I'm really messing with the temp basals. How do I know how much to increase at the time? You just guess a number? I mean, that's what I've been doing. Like, 80%, 35%,
Yeah. The one of the most interesting things about talking to people live is that they always want to know how much, how long. And the truth is, I don't know. Like try, you know what I mean?
Right.
Just go for it. Give it a little shot. I wouldn't, she's 3. Obviously she's probably tiny. Probably doesn't use a lot of insulin. I wouldn't go from 0.1 an hour to 0.9, but I wouldn't
Right.
but I'd try 0.15. And then if it didn't work, I'd go to 0.2. The way I think about adjusting basal insulin, and there's a great episode about adjusting it. I think about it differently than Jenny does, who you'll hear on that episode if you listen. I just think about it like volume, like music I'm listening to. And it's kind of an old idea now, I guess, for kids, but I just think of basal as like I turn it up until it gets too loud, and then I just turn it back a little bit till it's comfortable.
Right.
And so
right.
I can't tell you, like, I can't do this, and I'm really sorry I can't, but I could fix all your basals in like 8 hours. But it's overwhelming. Like it would ruin my life. But it's that easy. Like more or less at this point now, my daughter's got 1 basal rate for 24 hours. It's the same basal rate all day long and all night long. And sometimes, like I said, if she goes back to school, that's not going to work. But right now it works fine. So just try a little more. If you get too far, a little less. Just remember this about basal. If you find a spike at 1 a.m., don't change the basal at 1 a.m. Change it at midnight, because if you increase it at midnight, it's got to get in there and build up so that it's actually that heavier blanket when 1 o'clock comes. It could end up being 11:30. It could end up being 12:30 for you. I don't know the distance of time it'll be, but it's not 1 o'clock for 1 o'clock.
Right.
That's all. So
I get that. Yeah. And I have one more thing, and I don't want to take up all the questions, but when she's rising after a meal, say that maybe I miscalculated or whatnot, how do I know the difference between, should I give her more bolus or should I up her basal to stop that rise?
The answer is it's probably basal if she really needs it. Oh, no, excuse me. It's probably bolus if she really needs it, because the basal is going to, especially at those small numbers, it's going to take forever to make a real impact on her.
Right.
So it's probably bolus. Okay.
Thank you.
It's temp basal if you can plan ahead for it.
Right.
If that makes sense. Okay. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Hey, Henry.
Hey. So how do you know like when to pre-bolus? Like for what meal?
Good question, man. Do you have a CGM?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to find a time when it's not time to eat and your blood sugar is stable somewhere. So it could be 150 or 130 or 180, and it's been stable like that for a while. Pick a number in your head. Say, I'm 150 and I want to be 100. Make a bolus that you think is going to bring you from 150 to 100, and then watch your CGM. And when it starts to go like this, the time between when you push the button and when you saw the diagonal arrow down, that's probably your pre-bolus time, or really close to it, okay? But keep in mind, a pre-bolus when you're 90 is going to be different than a pre-bolus when you're 200. It takes more insulin to move 200 because you're already in a deficit than at 90 when your basal is probably really good. So it's always a little different, but that's a good kind of starting place to try to figure out the time. If I had to guess, man, if I just had to pull a number out, I'd say 15 minutes.
Okay.
But you'll figure it out, okay? Good job. Anybody else? Hi, Caitlin.
Hi.
Hey, what's up, kid?
So when you said that, like at night, where your blood sugar, it's a piece of cake, for me, it's not kind of how it happens.
It's because you're growing.
Yeah.
So,
like last night, I was fine. Then, so around maybe 10, I went up a little bit. My mom corrected. Then I kept on coming down. Almost the whole night, I was going up and down.
Okay.
All night.
When you're bouncing like that, your basal's wrong. Okay. Then you ask yourself, am I bouncing and having to stop lows, or am I bouncing and having to correct highs? If you're bouncing and correcting lows, your basal's probably too strong. And if you're bouncing and correcting highs, it's probably not strong enough. So I know you don't grow every night, but tell your mom, if she's like off to the side there somewhere, maybe, or no, good for you. Tell your mom that when she notices it happening like it usually happens, to just do something with your basal right then and there. Just think, this is probably a night I'm going to grow. I need more basal. And just commit to it and just do it. Because I don't want to see her up all night, because she's probably not sleeping. She's probably watching it climb and then bolusing and like, oh, it's working. And then it's like, oh, I gave her way too much. Because it's possible. What's your basal overnight? Do you know? No? All right, listen. It's probably like 0.6. I'm
Oh.
guessing. All right. But if it is, try 0.75 on nights when you're growing. And there'll be times, listen, there's going to be times you're going to have to correct those growth spurts with boluses. But if you can see them coming, if she can look at the CGM and kind of get that feeling like, oh, this looks like one of those nights, then she can try to get ahead of it. Okay. Tell her to punch it first. Okay.
Also,
Yeah.
so over on Monday, we went to, so we went to the beach.
Mhm.
I don't know why we did, but we did. My mom brought insulin, put it in a cooler just in case if something went wrong.
Right.
We come home that night. We come home that night and she sees my blood sugar keep on going up and down. So she decides to change it.
Mhm.
Then the next night, she sees that my pot, I keep going up. So she's putting so much insulin. Then she's like, okay, nothing's working. We're changing the pot.
Good.
So she has me put numbing cream on. Then she tells me my dad's gonna change it. He doesn't come into my room at all because I guess I'm fine. So she thought maybe I had to change the pod. It's because she didn't wait for it to start coming down. She just thought, oh, it's going up, it's gonna stay up.
Yeah, it can happen. Sometimes you have a lot of, you're too young for this, but there's a guy that came on the podcast once and said that sometimes you'll see a guy put a pen in his pocket and then rob a bank. And some people will think that pens cause bank robbery. And that's a really weird way of saying that what's happening in front of you isn't always what you think.
Mhm.
Right? So the way I like to think about it is, once you get to a position where you know that when I bolus, this happens, or when I change my basal, that happens, when you know that's going to happen, when your body doesn't react the way you expect, after your expectation is legitimate, like you've proven it over and over again, then it's time to look at the way you're getting your insulin. But there's probably so much wrong with your basal and your boluses that your blood sugar is jumping around for reasons that your mom thinks is the pen, but it's got nothing to do with the pen. Okay. So until your basal's right, you're not going to be able to believe in any of the other things that you think. As a matter of fact, if you're bouncing around a lot, most of the reasons you have in your head about why that's happening probably aren't true. Okay. So get your basal right first. Guys, if you're going to go home and work on this, it's basal first. Get your basal right, then work on your pre-boluses, then work on the amounts of insulin around the food. It's basal, pre-boluses, amounts for food. That's how you start this. Okay. But until your basal's right, nothing else is going to work. I promise. Okay. Thank you, Caitlin.
Yeah.
Bye. Anybody else? Mosh, go ahead. Sorry, I remuted you. I apologize. Go
That's
ahead.
okay. Sorry. So I have the Dexcom G6 CGM, and it's all great when it's working. It's very accurate. However, it doesn't work very often. In fact, it's meant to last 10 days, but most of the time it will only last about 5. So I'll end up with big hours where my CGM is not working.
So
The problem is,
I hear what you're saying. It's a pain, and you can't figure it out. So it's not the simple things. Like, it's not like you're not hydrated or something simple like that, right?
Right.
The one thing I could tell you is that I don't work for the company, but I have nothing but success with it for my daughter, and my daughter has a friend that has your experience. And I don't know if that's a body chemistry thing or not. Like, I can't even begin to guess. What I can tell you is that you should get a hold of Dexcom and tell them this isn't just one sensor. This is what happens. I need you to help me figure it out, because they can actually see your blood sugars on that side, and they can help you try to figure out why. I don't know what the answer is going to end up being beyond stay hydrated, wear it in a place where it's not being pinched constantly, that kind of stuff. But I feel for you, because I feel terrible when her friend tells me all the time, like, I want to be more aggressive, but I can't. I'm not sure I'm always going to have this information. The one thing I can tell you is that there are plenty of people who listen to the podcast who are on MDI, and they have plenty of success. You just have to test more. So the truth is, the difference between a pump and a CGM, a pump and not having a pump, is you have to test more. You don't have control over your basal rates. And those are the only two differences between MDI and a pump, other than you have to inject every time you want insulin. If you're willing to inject more, you could do that, but you're never going to be in charge of your basal. I'm sorry. I wish I had a better answer for you, but have you contacted them?
Yeah, I mean, we call for replacements almost every week.
But I would say, what I'm saying is, not just asking them for replacements. Tell them, look, this is obviously not a bad sensor. This is how it's reacting with my blood sugar. Is there a way you can help me figure out if this could work better for me?
Yeah. All right. Thank you.
Good luck. All right, guys, I've almost blown out my voice. Is there anybody else? Gina, what are you, like 14? Yeah.
I wish.
I'm right up on it, Gina. What's your question?
I got a package.
Oh, Gina got a Dexcom. She's been trying for weeks to get one. Congratulations. Good for you.
I got it like 2 hours after we had our podcast our meeting last week. So I slapped that baby on, and I'm learning a lot. It really has been very informative. My basal does seem to be good.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm learning on how certain foods, how my body reacts. And so
yeah,
how to adjust things and how to increase or decrease what I'm taking as far as boluses go and so forth.
Cool.
I've really been working hard on trying to do the pre-bolus.
Good for you. We're gonna we'll do another one of these for adults in a week or two probably, and I'd love to hear more about it then. Congratulations.
Great,
really
thank
cool.
you.
Yep. All right, guys. Anybody else? By the way, you guys all hung on. There were 49 people in here for the whole time, and there's 44 right now. It's very cool of you to hang and listen, and I appreciate this. Has this been valuable for you, or is this a huge waste of your time? And it's okay to be like honest. Like, I don't want to do this kind of stuff if it's Dylan, how are you? Dylan, how did you end up talking to Pietro yesterday? It's because you guys are both from the Phoenix area, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's a nice guy, isn't he?
Well, it's a JDRF event.
Okay. That was very
like
cool.
a little JDR. It's kind of just like this, but with like
less
kids.
cool people. I hear what you're saying. Right.
Yeah.
All right, cool. All right, I'm gonna let you go. There's a guy on the podcast today who he's the first person in America to get his license to fly an airplane where he can have passengers with him. And he's the first guy to get the license. He's really a very interesting guy. So it's very cool. He's very excited. All right. One more shot. Anybody?
I do.
Oh, Laura, go ahead. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Yes, talking about rice, and I think that was my culprit. And I do have a graph and showing kind of where I actually bolused and everything, but I'm gonna have to move the screen over. So I apologize because I can't figure out how to exactly.
No, it's okay. So guys, in a second, there's some meals that are going to require extended boluses. It's something your pump does, right? Like, so rice kind of goes in and it doesn't start pulling right away. Some rices do, some rices don't. There's different kinds of rice, which is something you never considered before. But some of that rice just goes in your stomach and sits there for a while. Like an hour later, starts putting your blood sugar up. So sometimes you can say this whole meal is 10 units. I want to do an extended bolus. I'm going to do 50% of that or 5 units when I push the button. And I want the other 5 units to go in slowly over the next hour and a half, creating that heavier blanket of insulin over the time where the rise is going to come from the rice. So it's the very doable thing. But Laura, go ahead. Let me see. How did you do with it? Was this just regular white rice?
Yeah, because it was Cordova. And the thing is, you might want to unmute me so I can have my 2 hands, please.
You're right. Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah.
There you go.
There, thank you.
Sorry, I wasn't sure what was happening. I thought you were having a stroke, but now I understand better. Go ahead.
Yeah, I unmuted myself.
Okay.
It moved. There we are. Okay. Oh. There.
For everybody else,
Okay.
Look at you. Move it a little to the other side, right there.
Okay.
Good job. Yeah, only to 120. That's excellent.
I know, and see, I have a pre-bolus there.
It hit pretty hard, that pre-bolus, and you didn't panic and let it work, and then your blood sugar stayed stable. I think the next time that's very nice.
Oh, but the thing is, you'll see that as it went up, though.
Then it lost. You lost there, but
I
still,
lost, and yeah, and the thing is.
You'll get that right because it came back to 120. You probably just needed a little more of it up front or spread out through that time. You'll get it.
Yeah.
That's really cool.
I did, but then I was up till like midnight. Well, sleeping off and on until about midnight to get it down. And it was like about over 2 units to get it down. So
Right.
the thing is, you talked about extended bolus, and kind of saw my graph. About generally, how much would you say to do that?
I would probably tell you that those 2 units belonged in the original bolus up front a little more, and it would have stopped the rise, and probably somewhere in that time where it went from 120 to 150, that you just needed more of that insulin there. So just a little more, a little sooner, it looks like. And by the way, and to make it easier for you guys, basmati rice isn't as harsh as white rice. It's just a different kind of rice. It doesn't hit as hard for people. So, all right. I really appreciate this. Thanks, Laura, very much. You guys were terrific. If this ends up being valuable for you, if you or your parents could send a note and let me know a week or now for a month from now, I'd love to know how this actually helped or didn't help. So you don't have to, but if you can, that would be really kind. So it was really nice meeting all of you, and thank you so much for doing this. It was very cool to meet you guys. Have a great night.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.